Aurora says an apartment complex is being cleared out because it's unhealthy and neglected, not because of anonymous viral claims about Venezuelans. A Coloradan who tried to help Donald Trump overturn an election flips and promises to help prosecutors. The horrible rollout of the federal student aid program is hurting low-income students, but some schools in Colorado found a way around it.
We've been working tirelessly for the last year to make sure that families feel supported.
The state climatologist tells us what our recent wildfires and climate suggest about the fires still to come this summer and fall. And a word about the very unlikely 8-year journey of this program. Next. The city of Aurora is pushing back on viral claims made by far-right social media accounts about what's happening right now at a long-troubled apartment complex in that city. The city says the apartments are being condemned and cleared out because of code violations, a lack of electricity, and trash pileups. That hasn't stopped anonymous accounts from claiming that the complex has actually been taken over by a Venezuelan gang. Our Angela McCall takes a closer look.
Rumors on social media make it hard to see the truth. So when we heard the rumors about 1568 Nome in Aurora being taken over by a Venezuelan gang, we had no choice but to look into it.
If you know Aurora, then what you know is we have areas in our city, unfortunately, that have been overtaken and that we have to take back.
Mayor Kaufman alluded to it, but didn't specify what area. The property investor we talked to on the phone said his attorney wrote a letter to the AG's office about the gang that had, quote, forcibly taken control.
I think it's entirely racist. I think it's a way for them to shift the focus from their lack of accountability and lack of transparency.
V. Reeves, an advocate with House Keys Action Network Denver, says it's just a way to shift the blame when the city says it has, quote, documented substantial, long-standing, unresolved violations. Code enforcers have taken these pictures of rats on the property and piled up trash. And in other tales of a bad landlord, the company won't even pay their Aurora water bill. So are there gangs? The city won't definitively say yes or no. They say they're aware of a national concern and will work to determine if there is a connection.
As far as what happens next, the city says unless the property owners remedy every single documented violation, the city will designate the building as unsafe due to its condition, not because of gangs. They plan to notify residents on Wednesday that they have to be out by Tuesday, August 13th.
And there's been a suggestion that because of this gang in particular, that Aurora police won't even go to this complex. They're saying that that is flatly false.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're saying. They're saying, in fact, they actually know this to be a nuisance property, which means that they increase patrols and that they are actually there all the time.
All right. We'll continue to follow what's going on there. Angeline, thank you very much. 2 anti-trans initiatives aimed at school kids have failed to make the ballot. They didn't gather enough signatures. Apparently, they weren't even close. Organizers of the group Protect Our Kids acknowledged today they fell short of the 124,000 valid signatures they needed to gather by today. They said they got more than halfway there, but of course, they would have needed to turn in far more than 124,000 to account for the inevitable number that would get tossed. Churches and conservative political figures have been pushing this effort. The ballot measures to force schools to out kids to their parents if they question their gender identity and ban trans girls from girls' sports were organized with help from Texas televangelist and self-described Christian nationalist prophet Lance Wallnau.
A handful of Christians in Colorado, which is California Junior. It's like they try to compete with California to be as radical and as weird as California is. That's the government takeover of Colorado, and that's going to get reversed.
We must speak this truth over our kids to protect them from this ideology. If we all arm our children with truth and cover them in the blood of Jesus, if we stand up as Esthers and Mordecais and Deborahs and Davids, I truly believe that we will win this spiritual battle for our children.
Today, that Protect Kids Colorado organizer Aaron Lee said their failed ballot initiative put their opponents on notice and that their movement is here to stay. If you're going to do crimes, don't do them with Jenna Ellis, because if there is one thing we know about Donald Trump's former attorney from Colorado, it's that Jenna Ellis will flip on you faster than an Olympic gymnast. For the second time, Ellis has turned state's evidence in an election interference case. She's taken a plea. She's cooperating with prosecutors. She was one of 17 co-defendants charged in Arizona for putting together a slate of fake electors in a state that Trump lost. Ellis will have charges of felony fraud, forgery, and conspiracy dropped in return for her cooperation and her testimony. In an election interference case out of Georgia, Ellis also flipped on her co-defendants, including Trump himself. She pleaded guilty to a felony there. Ellis has been barred from practicing law in Colorado for the next 3 years, and she's been censured for her election rigging lies. The former Colorado Christian University professor now works as a conservative talk radio host. The federal government's botched rollout of the student aid process has sent requests for tuition help falling. They're down 11% in Colorado. Some students who need help going to college are therefore not getting it right now. Yet our Jaleesa Arizari found 2 universities with something to celebrate.
Summer on a college campus may not feel so wild, especially when last year's FAFSA application rollout was a ride.
Yes.
For Curleen Eglos.
I would say a roller coaster. You know, we recognize that the Department of Education is doing all that they can to get through this process, but it's been rocky. It's been rocky.
Eglos's colleague Long Huynh feels it as well.
It's a roller coaster, right, for sure. It's tough. It's created a lot of stress for our staff.
Huynh and Eglos both work for MSU Denver. They spent the year navigating the government's FAFSA fumble and the consequences they feared would come with it. According to the National College Attainment Network, completed FAFSA applications in Colorado are down by 9%. But at MSU Denver, they dropped by only 2.9%.
You know, definitely a bit better than the actual national average.
A number considered a victory for Huynh.
Oh, absolutely.
Who's in charge of student enrollment.
And our headcount is actually almost 3% higher than the same time last year.
Across the state, Colorado Mesa University is also calling this year a win.
At this stage, it looks to me like we're going to be up somewhere in the 31% range, so significant.
President John Marshall and his team calculated their own FAFSA estimates, and if they were wrong, they paid the difference. A big financial risk that worked.
Likely going to welcome the largest class of freshmen we've ever had in our history.
Marshall says the college had to pay about $250,000 in aid that they underestimated. He'll take it. For him, last year's wild ride was worth it.
To be able to see hundreds of students go to college, great investment.
Now, both universities made a lot of effort to get as many FAFSA applications completed, from creating their own financial aid calculator to podcast workshops. They are both relieved that students were able to get the opportunity to go to school. But we should also mention that FAFSA applications for students of color or low-income communities, they're down by 13%. Kyle.
Wow. All right. Well, appreciate their hard work. Jaleesa, thank you. Your generosity is helping to support survivors of domestic abuse and sex assault in Jefferson County. Your latest Word of Thanks micro-giving campaign, between the one-time donations and monthly supporters of the Word of Thanks Fund, it's raised more than $30,000 for the nonprofit Porch Light. That gives survivors one place to go to get services and support from dozens of providers and agencies. If you know of a great nonprofit that could use our community's combined support, and you've provided $13 million of it already, email me next at 9news.com. Firefighters are thrilled to see something we haven't seen in a while: rain. It's helping them make real progress in Jefferson County.
Like August of 2020, you just look at the statistics and it's like, how is it that hot and that dry for basically the whole month of August?
These fires raise fearful memories of Colorado's worst fire seasons. Our state's point man on climate weighs in with predictions next. The Jefferson County Sheriff's Office is optimistic that families who evacuated for the Quarry fire will be able to go home soon. Little rain yesterday and today allowed firefighters to do controlled burns, eat up some of the fuel that fire could have used to grow.
All the stars have aligned, and we are very, very excited that it's going exactly as we hope. And God willing and Mother Nature willing, we will get people back in their homes very soon.
That said, the Sheriff's Office stressed they don't want to give anybody false hope. They don't yet have a timeline for when those orders to evacuate will be lifted. That wildfire near Deer Creek Canyon grew to 527 acres, but it's now 45% contained. The cause is still under investigation. Firefighters are pretty sure that a person started it, but they don't know if it was an accident or on purpose. Our next conversation tonight is with Colorado's state climatologist. I asked Russ Schumacher what he foresees for this fall when it comes to fires, and whether a hot, dry setup like we have this year suggests that we could be in for a disastrous wildfire season like we saw in 2012 in 2020. Last week's fires have a lot of Coloradans concerned that we could see a really dangerous wildfire season this summer and this fall. What do you think?
This week is going to be humid, cooler, rainy, so hopefully we'll be okay at least in the near term. But we've got big fire out on the West Slope as well, and the kind of medium range outlook out through the fall and even into the early winter is pointing towards warmer and drier than average conditions continuing. So those are the weather and climate conditions we tend to look at as those hot, dry conditions. And also, the spring was pretty wet and last year was extremely wet. And that's often the bad situation is when you go from wet to dry, you build up all the fuels and then it gets hot and dry and they dry out and then they're ready to burn at that point.
How often does a bad setup result in a bad fire year?
Yeah, I mean, the really bad fire years we've had have been these hot, dry, drought years and also really warm. So there, thinking back to 2000, there aren't too many of those years where it was really hot and dry that we didn't have pretty substantial fire activity. When we run down when were the really bad droughts here in Colorado over the last 20 years, it was 2002 and 2012 and 2018 and 2020. Getting there this year, and those are the same years that we think about with the big fires.
When our next conversation continues in a moment, we'll explore the idea that the Denver area is actually one of the most climate-safe cities in America, and whether that might bring a lot more people moving here in the coming decades. But first, Kathy Sabin, rain. Any of it, we'll take it.
Oh, and this will be a theme this week, Kyle. As a matter of fact, a major pattern shift allowing for tropical moisture in from the southwest. Now, the air quality is still poor. Quite a bit of smoke and haze is evidenced by our live on cameras around the area. 93 today, and we've cooled off because of the cloud cover and the rain. Yesterday, 102, and this current reading at DIA, that was also our morning low temperature, so pretty unusual. Humidity values coming up, something I haven't been able to report on in quite some time. Winds are light but shifting, so that's something fire managers are watching, along with the lightning and wind with thunderstorms that are crossing the foothills and now moving into Denver. Gentle rain in Denver, but a brief heavy downpour not out of the question. Lightning detection showing some activity around DIA back toward Aurora, down toward the Parker area. The trend will be for these showers to move through between now and about 9 o'clock. They move out, skies clear. We'll do this again tomorrow. Morning sun, about a 30% chance of storms that will maintain their integrity coming off the foothills. So there's a chance for rain tonight and again tomorrow. We're going to hold in the 70s. This is just going to be lovely for the next few hours. So we're above average and hot for Tuesday and Wednesday with afternoon storms. The big change, Thursday, Friday, highs in the 70s and 80s. And that below average temperature trend continues into the weekend and first part of next week, with our best chance from some really good rain from these storms will be on Thursday and Friday afternoon. Let's hope.
Olympic history was made this weekend when a small nation won their first Olympic medal in history, despite having a tiny team of fewer than 10 athletes. It was St. Lucia. It was not our friends in Albania. Our adopted Olympic long shot is still without their first medal. Just once, we want to hear that Albanian anthem, Hymni I Flamurit, hymn to the flag, playing at a medal ceremony at the Olympics. But alas, you just get it here on a local news program in Denver because Albania's at goose eggs. Luisa Gega of Albania, she's a European track champion. She's legit, and she had a decent chance of placing in the steeplechase this weekend, but finished a heartbreaking 9th in her qualifying heat and missed the finals. This woman is dedicated. She has trained alone since the only track in the Albanian capital city was demolished. She spends half the year training at altitude in Albania, the other half of the year training in the hills of Kenya. Sadly, 9th in her qualifying heat. So Albania's best chance to win is still coming up. There are 3 Russian-born Albanian wrestlers who hit the mat later this week. Albania calls recruiting them out of Russia and to compete for Albania a theft against the Russian state. Let's hope it pays off. Despite dry conditions and wildfires, researchers think that Colorado could actually become somewhat of a haven for people fleeing climate change in the decades to come.
Our climate in Colorado is a lot nicer than a lot of other places because it doesn't...
My conversation with the state climatologist continues next. Climate change will impact coastal cities differently than Denver. It's going to bake cities in the South and Southwest in a way that Colorado will escape. We return now to my next conversation with Colorado state climatologist Russ Schumacher. I often read that Denver metro area especially is going to be one of the most climate resilient and climate safe cities in America over the next 50 years. And that as a result, we might actually see an influx of population from people wanting to get out of the Southwest, the South, coastal cities. Is Denver going to be safer?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely things working in our favor here in Colorado. You can go to the mountains. Like, there's places in Colorado in the mountains that have never reached 90 degrees. I mean, you can go up to the top of a mountain peak. It's probably never even been 80 degrees up there. So that's, attractive for people to kind of get away from the heat. Even if the front range gets really hot, like it's been the last couple of weeks, well, you can drive up to the mountains and it'll be cooler, right? So that is an advantage. It's the wildfires and the smoke that I think is the thing that is potentially going to turn people off in that. We've had a lot of smoke. 2020 was terrible with so many fires nearby, but even when the fires are not as active here in Colorado, the smoke's coming in from California or Canada or the Northwest or wherever, that's one of those things where I think people, in the Western U.S. where that increase in wildfire smoke is sort of turning them off to what otherwise is a really nice climate here, right? Like, our climate in Colorado is a lot nicer than a lot of other places because it doesn't get extremely hot. The nights are cool. There's a way to get relief by going up in the mountains, but it's this wildfire risk that really, literally kind of is in people's faces.
In my full 12-minute conversation with Colorado state climatologist Russ Schumacher on the next YouTube channel and 9news.com, we break down a whole series of weather threats in Colorado to sort out what is and is not impacted by climate change. When Next went on the air 8 years ago tonight, I did not expect we would be here. Word about that next. We've met here like this more than 2,000 times. Never would have imagined that when Next first went on the air 8 years ago tonight. A lot of people expected Next to be a failed experiment, and I'll be honest, that was probably a really smart bet. But we're still here because you're still here. When you watch, when you share our journalism with others online, when you write in each night with smart questions and feedback, you keep this odd little program on the air year after year. By proving that people are interested in a newscast that is not just a litany of tragedy, a listing of the 10 worst things to happen in Colorado today, plus weather, sports, and a little animal story at the end. Your investment in Next over the last 8 years proves that there is a real appetite for a local news program that focuses on accountability journalism, detailed analysis, a focus on policy, and a more realistic reflection of our state. The good along with the bad, the strange little stuff, a nightly conversation about the way that we talk to each other, and a chance for us to do some good as a community. Much has changed in the last 8 years. More will change in the future. But I am grateful that we've had this space to talk about it together.